If you or anyone you know is about to have a hysterectomy or who recently had one, then you're going to want to stay tuned for today's video because we are talking to a good friend of mine, Lisa, about her recent experience with her hysterectomy. That's coming up right now. Hi, Lisa. Welcome to Morphus.
Thank you for having me, Andrea. It's great to be here.
I'm so happy to have you. And we've been talking about doing this for a while, and you are finally ready to share your story. So I'd love you to talk a little bit about the backstory about why you had to get a hysterectomy. And then I also want to go into, before the end of the video, some tips that you can provide our viewers that if they were to have to get one, or if they had one, perhaps they can take that information with them to help them recover and to further along their journey, their health journey. So let's start with your actual story. What happened?
Sure. So it was almost exactly a year ago. It was October the 31st of 2019. On the Monday of that week, I met with an oncologist. The oncologist was able to confirm that day that I did, in fact, have some cancer cells. And it was her recommendation that I have a total hysterectomy, which happened on the Thursday, so just like a few days later. So it was a bit of a whirlwind, certainly not a lot of time to think about it, which I think can be good because, it's better to not have too much time. You just have to kind of make a quick decision and move forward, right? So that's the actual, week that it happened. Prior to that, there was like about a year where it was kind of leading up to that moment. I had had some really, a month-long period. And out of that, there was a few months later, there was not an MRI, but like, what's it called?
Ultrasound?
Ultrasound, thank you. And the results of that ultrasound were a few months later. They said there was some cells, some fibroids, and they wanted to get that checked out. Fast forward all the way to September of that year. So now it's like a full year has gone by. And in the September of that year, I had what's called an endometrial ablation. So at that time, they took out the fibroids. They did the endometrial ablation, which is basically like having your uterine lining completely removed. That's what they do.
Okay.
Right? So out of the results of that, a few weeks go by, I get a call from the gynecologist who did that surgery. And he said to me, I'm really surprised. I didn't expect this, but there are some cancer cells. And I'm going to recommend that you go to see an oncologist. And then within a couple of weeks of that, now we're back to, October, whatever it was, the 27th. And then I had the hysterectomy. Yeah.
Can you share how old you are and when all of this, to give people an indication?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm now 51. So I was 50 at the time. I had just turned 50 a couple weeks prior to the surgery. So October. And I had been in really, I thought really good health other than, the obviously approaching probably menopause. In fact, in 2019, I had trained and I had done 2 triathlons that summer and was generally feeling, in quite good health. But that period that had lasted for, well, it was actually over a month, obviously was concerning. And that's when I had reached out to get that and to sort of do some digging and find out about that.
Now, you were talking a little bit about what happened before. I just want to go there for a minute and then we'll continue onward. So
sure, absolutely.
Did you know when you were in perimenopause? So I remember you telling me that you were having very, very heavy bleeding, which you just mentioned earlier. Take us through your journey as you were entering perimenopause and you were in perimenopause prior to finding out that information.
Yeah, I don't remember, that much of it at this time, other than occasionally having the heavy periods. There was that one in the October, which would have been October of 2018, that really, really stands out. 2019, excuse me. Prior to that, I was having relatively regular periods. I don't remember a lot prior to that. Yeah. I think that it was the need to have the surgery was scary. I mean, it was shocking. It's not something that I wanted to do. I remember, very clearly to this day, lying on the table and about to go into surgery and saying to the doctor, I don't want this. And that was kind of the last thing that I remember happening. I do have a lot of recommendations for women who, are leading into this, and what they should do for themselves post-surgery. In terms of pre-surgery, I think, there's some basic things like, and these are things that no one told me. And these are also things that, when you go to the hospital and you do your pre-op, they give you a pamphlet. At least that's what they gave me. And in the pamphlet, it has, a bunch of recommendations, things that you should be doing, etc. But what I want to share are those things that are not in the pamphlet, and things that other people might, really find helpful. Some basic things, like, for example, really take care of yourself and make sure that, like, basic things like meals are going to be taken care of at least for a week post-surgery. And if people are offering to do that for you, please take them up on that. A week post-surgery, you're not going to be having to worry about meals and things like that. So I definitely would suggest minimum a week, have, the meals all laid out, whatever it's going to be. I don't know about other people, but I can tell you my husband is like a super, super strong person and doesn't normally, crack or anything. But when I had my surgery, it was like, when I was down, I think he was down. So in terms of thinking that you're going to be able to rely on like a partner or a spouse, don't necessarily count on that, right? Like, you don't know how other people are going to react within your family when you are down and when you are trying to heal and when you are trying to recover. So that would be like kind of like a basic thing. There's other specific things, and post-surgery for me was really, really quite traumatic. When I spoke to the surgeon oncologist after I had my surgery, I was speaking with her and I said, the night after the surgery, the night of the surgery, I should say, the withdrawal that I experienced from the estrogen, which nobody talks about, nobody prepares you for.
Because you're thrown into menopause, basically.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I said to her, I was having withdrawal. Like, it felt like in the middle of it, I remember thinking, I don't know what it's like to withdraw from like a drug, but I would imagine that that's what it's like. Your skin is itching. It's like you can't get comfortable. You're completely nauseous. When I said that to the doctor,
yeah,
she said, oh, no one's ever described it to me that way before.
Really?
Yeah, which to me implies that she knows that you go through a withdrawal, but yet no one had actually put it into words.
Wow. And why do you think that is? Do you think it's that people are embarrassed or they don't want to share it? Or what are your thoughts about that?
I don't know. I can't speak for other people and why they wouldn't necessarily describe it that way. But I can tell you that the evening of, and this is my other, my second or third point, I should say, where I would really encourage people to advocate and be prepared, is that I didn't imagine that I would need to stay in the hospital. because no one said that that was really even an option
Okay.
the night of the surgery. And I know years ago, like they used to keep women, I think, as I understand, in the hospital for days, a couple days,
Oh, wow.
right?
Yeah.
So in my particular case, it was, okay, can you urinate? And as soon as you can urinate, you're like, you're out. You're like out of the hospital.
Charge there, yeah.
In the meantime, I'm completely nauseous. I'm vomiting to the point of, I remember again, being in the hospital. Scott had to leave me to go get the car. I'm in a wheelchair, and I have a vomit, like a bag to hold the vomit, and there's so much vomit that there's vomit going all over the floor outside of the bag, and I'm being discharged from the hospital. Okay, so the trauma of the surgery itself, like the physical trauma, the emotional trauma, the psychological trauma, in and of itself is big. But then when you have like all of these other like legitimate physical things happening, I mean, again, I remember very clearly being in the car on the ride home, and like, here I am like vomiting into a bag. Like no one should have to go through that. No one should have to experience that, And, in terms of getting back to that night and feeling like this incredible feeling of like this intense withdrawal. And I couldn't get comfortable. And here my poor husband is, like, my husband isn't a nurse, right? And so he's calling, a friend of ours who lives down the street, who's a doctor, and they're trying to get me something for the nausea, but nothing worked. That nausea lasted for like days.
Now, did you find out what was causing those, like, so is it a common thing where women who undergo a hysterectomy get nausea? Like, were these side effects something that is super common for other women as well, once you were kind of able to, speak to other women or go into forums and read? Like, what did you find out that other women are experiencing? Are they similar to what you experienced?
Yeah, so I had a reaction, I'm sure, to the anesthesia. In terms of the withdrawal from the estrogen, all I've done is speak with, that particular doctor that I was dealing with. And I had my follow-up calls with her, and, I got her reaction, which was, oh, no one's ever described it that way. But apart from that, the other thing that we haven't had a chance to talk about yet, which we've kind of like sort of skirted around a little bit, is like, it's like the secrecy. It's like the shame. And I understand not everyone is necessarily going to react in that way. But at the same time, I think that, when you're given a cancer diagnosis, there's like, it's something that, in my particular case, I didn't share with people. Right. And so to your question, what did you find out about other people? I don't know. I don't know, because it's taken me a year to even have this conversation with you. And I don't know necessarily what other people have experienced, because I don't think that there's a lot of great resources from a support standpoint to be able to help women. And I can tell you, though, it is a year-long process. It's a full year.
For recovery.
Pardon me?
For recovery.
Yeah, for recovery.
Physical, from emotional, mental.
Yeah. Now, in my particular case, I was told, oh yeah, it's fine, go back to work. So in my particular case, I started a new job within 2 weeks. It was far too soon, like much, much, much too soon. But yeah, I mean, getting back to, there could be a whole conversation around the shame, right?
Of course.
That could be an entire conversation in and of itself, really. So I want to make this point clear, and that is that if someone is listening to this and hearing us, know that insisting staying in the staying in the hospital, know that, like, I would want people to be able to advocate for themselves on their behalf, because in my particular case, I didn't know that, oh, I might need to stay in the hospital. Right. And the hospital deemed that I didn't need to, but I think I should have the opportunity to deem whether I need to stay or not.
And you would be able to, if you had told the hospital you wanted to stay, or doctor, they would have allowed you to stay that extra night?
I would imagine, I would hope.
Right. Okay.
But I don't know for sure. Right.
Right.
Now, in my particular case, again, just getting into like the very personal, details about what can happen. I mean, in my case, thank goodness a friend came over and took my daughter, my 14-year-old daughter at the time. Right. Because I wouldn't have wanted her to be in the house that night, to be able to, hearing what was going on. Not to mention the fact, like, again, this is pretty graphic. But so, you're nauseous, you're vomiting, you're going through this hormone withdrawal. And then in addition to that, they also do not tell you, they don't tell you this in the literature from the hospital, is that you may or may not have control of your bladder. Right. So in my particular case, I had no idea that was even a possibility. I was completely not prepared for that. I'm vomiting and I have no control. And so again, here's my poor husband having to be, a nurse and get towels. I mean, yes, I'm sorry, Andrea, this is quite graphic.
No, this is important information, Lisa. And I am so grateful that you have agreed to do this, because I think this information is so important for women who may need it one day, who may be going for one in, coming up, or maybe even went through it, that now they can help educate and share it with other people, share their experiences. So thank you for doing this. Nothing is too graphic. In menopause, we talk about everything. So I'm Morphus here. So nothing is too graphic. So please.
Well, it is. It should, maybe at the beginning, you should say explicit content.
I'm not so sure peeing and pooing is explicit content, but I hear what you're saying.
So really know that you're not going to know in advance how you're going to feel coming out of that surgery. And although, the hospital does that simple test, can you urinate on your own? I don't think that should be the criteria. I think that the criteria should go beyond that. Right?
Right.
The criteria should be, are you vomiting? Can you hold down food? I mean, these are things that how nauseous are you, right? Like, these are things that, know in advance, and that have the strength to be able to say, no, I'm not ready to leave, right? I'm not ready to go home.
You think that their nausea, I guess, your nausea was a reaction to the medication that you were giving, so the anesthetic. You think that's what?
I mean, I'm guessing, yes. Yeah. I think for sure, though, Andrea, the night, that was not the anesthetic. That was the complete, after 50 years of having estrogen in your body, there's the complete withdrawal. And it is a withdrawal. And like I said, I mean, I haven't experienced what withdrawal is, but you just kind of know instinctively, what's happening. And I remember thinking in the middle of the night, it's like, I've got shakes. I've got this terribly kind of itchy skin, it's like what I've seen before when it comes to withdrawal. Yeah.
Wow. And other than that, what are some other of those symptoms that you experienced that night that you've maybe, if you can remember? If you're not, we can move on to something else.
I mean, those are the major things, right? Vomiting, no control of your bladder, complete nausea, can't get comfortable. I was up all night. I couldn't sleep because I couldn't lay down. Right. So not only have you gone through this, surgery, which I would consider to be, fairly major, although I think that it gets downplayed. Right. And I think other women, because they're told that it's, no big deal, or it's major, or women maybe sometimes want to be like, oh, I was fine. And I don't know, I don't think everybody necessarily is. And I certainly wasn't, and I consider myself to be a pretty tough person. Right. Like I said, I mean, I did 2 triathlons that year, I gave birth naturally, I have, some fairly good credentials when it comes to pushing through. And that night, I remember saying to Scott, this is worse than giving birth.
Wow.
Yeah.
You mentioned the traumatic event and the emotional component. Let's talk, and I agree with you. I think that would be in another video, an absolute incredible, another interview to sit down and talk about it. But let's talk about it for a little bit. When a woman, we have a hysterectomy. What's the emotional component that is associated with it? How did you feel? You mentioned, now you no longer have your uterus. Talk a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely there was sadness, no question. Sadness, there was shame, there was loss, there was grief, there was an impact on esteem because you feel like different. I mean, you feel like changed. You feel emptied. You feel almost like maimed, right? Like you feel not how you want, like not how I wanted to feel, right? Like I said, I was lying on that table thinking, I don't want this.
Yeah.
And then for me, it was really like a double sort of whammy because post-surgery, when I met with when I had to actually do the 3-month or whatever it was follow-up, there was a discovery that from everything that they took out, now this was a total hysterectomy. So ovaries, everything. And what they took out, there was no cancer there.
Wow.
Yeah. It was so dramatic. Like I question, why did they have to take everything? I hear, even this week, as recent as this week, you and I both know Marie Forleo had a hysterectomy. She had a tumor the size of a grapefruit, I think she said, and she got to keep her ovaries, I think it was. And it's like, I read that and I thought, gosh, I wish I had got to keep mine. In my particular case, the fibroids were like an inch or something, and there was a bunch of them. But as I said, they got everything in September, but yet they went in and it was very radical. And I think that that's probably part of the grief. That's part of the sadness.
My question to you is, do you think you could have done it differently? Now that obviously now everything hindsight is 2020, but now that you know more, what are some things that we can arm women to empower women who are watching this video right now, to empower them that if they had a similar situation to you and they were told they need a hysterectomy, what questions would you tell them to ask their doctor so perhaps they can prevent having to take everything if they only need to take certain parts?
Sure. I didn't ask those questions, so I'm not sure that I'm like, well, I did. I did ask some questions in fairness to myself. I did ask some questions. Like I did try and push at that point in time and say, could you please just take everything except can you leave the ovaries? And the answer that I got was, well, no, everything has to go because they don't want to go back in again. And so to your question, Andrea, it's like, definitely I would encourage women to ask, does everything have to go? What can be left? And then why are you taking everything? The answer that I got was because it's better. If there's any cancer there, you don't want it to grow. And so again, it was out of an abundance of caution that, it was a total hysterectomy.
Do you feel that you were told what to do rather than making your own choice or having a say in it?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. There's a part of me that feels maybe a little bit, I'm disappointed, right? But at the same time, what I was assured was that by having this, I think that they tried to give me the bright side. Mm-hmm. And the bright side was, the bright side is that, your likelihood of developing other cancers will be minimized.
Right.
Because the estrogen feeds the cancer And so if you have, that was also why they didn't want to leave the ovaries,
Right.
because if there was any cancer, then having that estrogen left would feed that cancer. So the bright side that I was given was, well, the likelihood of other cancers will be minimized.
Right.
So for example, like breast cancer, different cancers your likelihood will be minimized. Now, I was told that, but then I questioned, okay, well, in the case of Marie Forleo, again, like, okay, but she has like this extremely large tumor. Well, why did her doctors make a decision to leave ovaries? So yeah. So I think that these are the questions that you can ask and see what kind of a response that you get. Yeah.
Let's move on to the side effects that you had afterwards. So you had your surgery, you had all those side effects the night of, and you mentioned it earlier. You talked about night sweats, and I know you still have them. You talked about different things. So now you've had the surgery and you're recovering throughout the year. Talk about some of those effects those side effects that you've had.
Yeah. So really close up to the surgery, they don't want you to lift anything. And definitely, you want to abide by that, because there's risk of lifting anything because of, I don't recall what can happen, but definitely that's the one. I guess it's not really a side effect, but something that you want to be kind of respectful of, any kind of heavy lifting. For me, other side effects happened pretty quickly. I mean, the night sweats, the hot flashes, the weight gain, all of that happened pretty quickly. And it's been a challenge over, the last year. And it's been within, I'm not sure, within days of having the surgery, all of those symptoms started, and they have, continued. And so for me, what I am always trying to do is figure out, is there a particular food that's causing the night sweats or the hot flashes? Is there something that I can change within my diet that's going to help that? I should say, like, I do have 20 years within the natural health products industry, and I'm very aware of eating well and monitoring what you eat and how what you eat can impact a variety of things, including your sleep, which, by the way, I haven't mentioned the insomnia as another side effect. So I'm aware I'm coming into this with a very high level of awareness of the importance of nutrition. I'm coming into this with a very high awareness of the importance of supplements and vitamin supplements and what they can do for you, with, over 20 years of being in that industry. So in terms of things that I'm always monitoring, I'm monitoring what am I eating? How can what I'm eating make things better from a hot flash, night sweat standpoint? How can supplements that I'm taking perhaps make things better? I think that exercise would be a top recommendation that I would be giving other women. So within a few days of my surgery, I started just going for walks again. And I know people talk about, exercise all the time, but I can't really understate the importance of it. Getting outside, getting fresh air, going for walks, what it does for, your mental health after surgery is incredibly impactful. Not to mention the fact that I was told by another doctor friend that the more I, got back into the routine of exercise faster, that would actually help my healing. So that was his, that's what he told me. That didn't come from my direct doctor, but certainly that's what I was told. So I did heed his advice, and I started walking pretty quickly. Like, I think within a few days I was out walking. Yeah. So, talking about the sleep issues, that was definitely one of them. You asked me earlier in the interview, what were some of the things that I had experienced in perimenopause leading up to the surgery. And I would say that for sure that the insomnia was like a major one that I had, that it most impacted me from a health standpoint in coming into menopause.
And it continued after you had your hysterectomy.
Yeah. I mean, it's better now. I do take medication to help it. And I am finding that I'm still, even after a year, Andrea, I'm still after a year trying to still tweak. How can I get my diet even better for me? Also, since I guess sometime in April during when COVID happened, I started doing Peloton and I started cycling indoors. So I've been pretty active. Like I've done over like 100 rides. I've done over 100 strength training sessions. And I think that strength training is really, really good as well. Like for me, am I necessarily getting results from a weight loss standpoint? Not necessarily. Am I even getting results from like an inch kind of standpoint? Not necessarily. But I think that for me, it's good from like that esteem piece, right? Like just feeling better, feeling a little bit stronger, getting that energy out, sweating. And I do think that all helps. I'll also say, and you and I have talked about this because we are good friends and we talk about all this kind of stuff. I will say that the biggest thing when it comes to sleep now is like, I have to have a cold room or else I am like, woo, in big trouble. So yeah, and it's not just a cold room. I actually have to have that sort of feeling of like a breeze. Otherwise I start to, it's almost like, and maybe you can even like kind of collaborate. It's almost like you start to feel like claustrophobic. Do you ever feel that way if you don't have that breeze?
I don't feel that way, but everyone has their own experience, right? But I definitely get the heat at night, and I have to have I use a product called the Bed Jet. I absolutely love it, and it provides that breeze just on me, like the air conditioning, the heat, the cooling on me, and it's awesome. And it's for me, that's been a big change for me in terms of sleeping at night and using cooling blankets and cooling sheets and making sure that I'm sleeping only in a tank top, but very, very light clothing, which it's very important. So
even a t-shirt will no longer work. Like
a t-shirt's too hot.
It has to have like, little tiny straps and it has to be open and t-shirt, forget about a t-shirt.
Way too hot. And the days of wearing sleep with days of wearing sweatshirts and done. Like those are symbols of pre-menopause, So I'm working on
flannel pants. Forget about it.
Flannel. Not going to happen. So I'm on that. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for sharing your experience. I definitely want to do this again. And I want to have another discussion around, like you had mentioned, the emotional component. And are there any other tips before we end today's interview on things that we could prepare women for or after? What are other, like the idea of preparing your food for a week or having someone take your children, all amazing tips. Anything else you want to leave us with before today's interview?
I'm going to come back to it again. Maybe it's even taking it a step further and saying to your doctor, if I insist on staying the night of the surgery, will you allow me to do that? And getting that agreement in advance. Okay. So that you have that assurance, because when you're in the hospital, I mean, I don't even remember seeing the doctor who actually performed the surgery, right? So your interaction with that doctor at that point in time is like extremely limited. That would probably be, something else. That would be helpful, that you can advocate on your behalf. And I think the big thing is like, over the next year after it happens, it's like learning to be even kinder to yourself than you've ever been to yourself before.
That's great advice. Thank you so much, Lisa.
My pleasure. Talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for doing this interview today and for being so honest about your experience. We're going to be bringing you more videos on hysterectomies. We want to empower you to ask questions to your doctor and also provide tips for before and after your surgery. So please share this video with anyone you feel would benefit from the information, because the more you share shows you care. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you next time.